So I noticed the moon's just coming up to its monthly connection with Jupiter, and Jupiter's on the MC in the UK right now. So that's very good for welcoming tonight's speaker, Adrian Duncan, and his talk on Jupiter, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Adrian's been an astrologer for a long time, professionally, about going back to the 80s, I think. And he was an editor of the Astrological Journal at one point, and an author of an astrological books, and most notably, maybe the producer of the World of Wisdom astrology software. So yeah, you can find Adrian online at astrowow.com. I'll just put that in the chat box as well. And yeah, as some of you might have heard before in the chat we were having, that Adrian and Aquarius Severn linked up from Denmark as long ago as 2009 when we were very ahead of the technology there. We did a Skype broadcast from Denmark. It's not quite so participative as doing it on Zoom these days. So yeah, it's really nice to welcome you back, Adrian. Maybe sometime we'll get to see you in person. But
well, yeah, I always like to come to England and enjoy the rain, you know.
Yes. So yeah, welcome to you, Adrian, and over to you.
Okay, thanks very much, and hello, everybody. So yes, we're going to talk about Jupiter. I've always been kind of not very, never really understanding Jupiter so well until I realized it could be a very bad boy too. And I don't normally repeat talks, but I actually made this talk last year when I was at the AA conference. But I thought, because Jupiter, as you can see, Jupiter here in the chart today, it's actually just gone back into Pisces. It was in Aries and went retrograde into Pisces. So if it can go back, I guess I can also go back. And as you can see, it's probably, I'm not sure if it's on the MC at 7:15 or at 7:30. But anyway, Jupiter's quite dominant in this horoscope. And the moon is tonight squashed between Neptune and Jupiter. So it's a kind of yeah, it's a funny horoscope because Mercury is exactly square Neptune. You know, I have a Mercury-Neptune square, so I should be able to confuse you all thoroughly this evening. And I thought I might do that like more with pictures than with words, but we'll see how it goes. So one of the basic things you think about with Jupiter is that it's always like searching for the truth. You know? Jupiter in your horoscope, it makes you want to find your truth. The thing is, and the point I want to make really in the talk is that this attachment that people have to what they believe to be the truth ends up being maybe the final veil that conceals knowledge or real knowledge, you know. So in the sense that Jupiter tends to filter out all the other truths that you don't want to recognize. So that's the chart for the evening. So it's kind of extremely mutable. Let's hope we can find some kind of truth tonight. So this is Jupiter. You know, it's huge. Jupiter's huge. It's if you mix all the other planets together, Jupiter would still weigh nearly 3 times more than all the other planets. It's got 79 moons, and some of its moons are actually bigger than Mercury, you know, and Pluto. So, you know, it's a really big guy. And of course, in Greek mythology, you know, Jupiter was like the big boss, king of the gods. You know, the sun was like just a little bit, so not quite so relevant. So Jupiter is a massive thing. And even the weather on Jupiter affects conditions on Earth. And there's a cycle, a Venus-Jupiter cycle, actually, which I can't remember how many years it is, but maybe 80 years or something, which actually affects heat and cold on Earth. So it has a vast effect. So that's a little bit about the solar system, the way it works, like astronomically. But I want to talk about a little bit about how it works in our consciousness. And so one way of looking at the way the planets are kind of operative is that, you know, the sun is the life giver in this solar system. The sun carries all the planets. They're revolving around it as the sun spirals through the Milky Way. And you know, everything, all the whole solar system is contained in a kind of energy vortex, protected in a way by the sun's magnetic field, which kind of where there's an absolute division between where the sun is and where outer space begins. And when they sent the Voyager 1 and 2 spaceships in the 70s out, they only just pierced the outer limit of the solar system recently. So the sun is life, sun is consciousness, sun is the kind of sense of self, or at least it's our personal sense of self. The sun in our horoscope kind of is what we identify with and what energizes our horoscope. So the sun in itself, or the consciousness that the sun represents, is completely untainted, you could say, by any kind of influence. But then we have the moon, which is going around the Earth, and it's kind of shielding and distributing the energies of the sun. So the moon is like something that you could say, how can you say, it receives the impressions, and the moon shows our impressionability. You know, so all the energy from the sun is kind of reflected by the moon, which kind of protects us as it orbits the Earth and builds this kind of sheath, you could say, around the Earth. So the moon is is both a sensitized field of energy, which is receiving too much power, you could sort of say, from the sun. So you could say the sun is our consciousness, but the moon is like all the habits, all the things we do to protect ourselves against the glare of consciousness. So every time we do something, we kind of store it in memory. And then we kind of do it again in the same way. If it worked, we're going to do it again in the same way. So moon builds up habits, and these habits become instinctive. And this instinctive thing becomes part of our unconscious. And our unconscious is ruling the show 97% of the time. So we mostly prefer, you could say, to be kind of proceeding in life, protecting ourselves with our habits, comforts, and all the things that kind of shield us from the glaring light of consciousness. So when we get in, when we're sort of wandering around on Earth, and we're seeing and we're hearing and we're tasting and touching and all the sensory systems, the only thing that says that this is real is the mind. You know, so we'll feel something or we see something, and what we see and what our mind registers, they're actually not similar. There's no absolute relationship between what we see in the outer world and what we represent in the inner world. What we see, or what we choose to see in the outer world, is like what we find useful. So scientific studies have shown that if you put your thumb at arm's length and just look at the thumbnail, that's the amount of, that's what we're actually seeing. That's that area of our panorama that we're seeing. The rest is made up by the virtual reality in the brain, which kind of builds the world around us. And as we shift our gaze, the brain's like working really overtime to create this kind of what we think is visual reality, but which is in fact billions, trillions of neurons working really hard, and they're kind of using a kind of compression technique, you could say, where the stuff is, the impressions are coming through the eyes, but they're quickly getting sorted, and all the extraneous information is sorted out. So we have the minimum amount of information to process for the brain. So Mercury is doing that all the time, with my voice and the meaning of that, the sounds vibrating in the ear. It's a huge process that our brain is going through, and Mercury's doing the job. So when we get that far and we start processing impressions, then we really start going to work on these impressions. And what happens is we either like them, or dislike them, or we are indifferent. So we either think it's good, or we think it's bad, or we don't really notice. We ignore. And we do that with everything, and that's the focus of Venus. So everybody's got that way of looking at something. They think a picture's nice, or a color's nice, or some clothes is nice, or a person is nice. And it's all to do with the filtering mechanism of our personal Venus, in the horoscope, which is affected by different planetary aspects, so that we gravitate towards what we like, and we go away from what we don't like. So we're already messing about with so-called reality out there, by choosing what we want to get impressions from, and then choosing whether we like those impressions or don't like them. And if we like them, then we're going to go after them. So we're going to try and acquire the objects of our desire, and that's the function of Mars. So Mars immediately mobilizes when we see something we like and says, "How can I get that?" And it mobilizes the whole energy system, so that we start focusing on a particular goal to get it. And if we don't like it, if it's a threat, Mars also mobilizes to protect us from that threat. So so Mars kind of is both what helps us get things, and what also protects us from things that are perceived as a danger. Okay, well, so far so good. That's the kind of personal system of you've got a kind of reality out there, and then we got all Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, and Mars in the horoscopes and all the aspects they make, and they're making a fantastic kaleidoscopic filter from which each individual gets a completely separate. There's consensus about what the world is like out there, but the way we individually process that is like totally dictated by the planets and planetary energies in our horoscope. And this is where the kind of trouble comes with Jupiter, because with all the experiences that we're getting from our personal, actions, we start forming opinions, and these opinions are they go so deep, and they're so intertwined with our identity. So beliefs and convictions, they're incredibly personal, and you can't. It's almost impossible to change them with people. So they gravitate towards beliefs because of certain energies or facets of their horoscope. So you're not going to change them very easily. And sometimes they can be kind of damaging. Sometimes they can be great. And that's where, it's important to understand what's beneficial with Jupiter, or what's not beneficial. Because basically, if a belief system is damaging to other people, it's not a good belief system. But if it's beneficial to other people, it is a good belief system. I've met quite a lot of people with odd beliefs, right? And I have a friend who's a really good astrologer. Actually, he's a really good astrologer, but he knows for sure that it's obvious, really, that that the whole thing with the Twin Towers and the fact that they were destroyed was not a Muslim plot or anything like that. It was an inside job, and my friend, he sent me a video of detonations. There's these you can see the detonations going off in the Twin Towers, which we got the Twin Towers to fall. And he's sure about that. And I say, well, okay, but what about the plane that hit the Pentagon? And this guy's an intelligent guy. He says, but actually, nobody really saw that. Nobody. This is his story, at least. Nobody really, there was debris around the Pentagon, but that was part of the plan. And if you're dealing with somebody who has a strong belief system like that, they'll always find an argument that will justify the belief. I've got another friend who's also really intelligent and a good astrologer also, but he knows that that America never actually landed on the moon. Because one of the giveaways is that the flag was fluttering in the wind. They forgot about that. So it's all been a kind of an illusion. All that moon landing stuff, never really happened. Then, of course, recently we've had this kind of thing with COVID, because it's a clear thing, that at least to some people, that it's a part of a plan. The whole thing with COVID, it was never really a world-threatening pandemic. It was a way of introducing nanobots, through these RNA injections, so that we can all be kind of controlled in one way or another. Very, very clever scheme. And of course, there's the one QAnon, which is like it's like the bigger the lie, or the bigger the fantasy, the more gripping it becomes. So in this one, QAnon, it's like the high-ranking politicians, Nancy Pelosi and all those, and Hollywood celebrities, Prince Charles, probably King Charles, I guess. They're all part of this kind of elite group where Satan worshipping, and they actually lured. And there was this Pizzagate, right, where they lured children to this the basement of this pizza parlor, where they could do all sorts of awful things. And in actual fact, one right-wing guy came with his rifle to this pizza parlor to find out what was going on in the basement. There wasn't actually a basement, so it didn't really, nothing happened. But so these belief systems and the whole idea with fake news and things like that, they can be very dangerous. Some people, in fact, there may be just as many people who believe that the Earth is flat than believe in astrology. I don't know, but there was a conference in America recently where the Flat Earth Society, you can see them on the net, the Flat Earth Society, they had a meeting. There was 800, maybe, I don't know, 1,000 people attending the conference, and they knew what they were talking about, I can tell you. This is the kind of theory. They're not stupid, Flat Earth people. They know there's a kind of atmosphere, but it's just like a hemisphere. And Antarctica actually rings the Earth. I mean, have you ever been to Antarctica? So how do you know? It doesn't. It rings the Earth. North Pole's in the middle, and there's a kind of, you can see it here, actually. I'll show you. This guy knows what he's talking about. So I'll just translate what he said. This guy's in a flat Earth conference, and you can see a lot of happy people around him, and he's holding up a little globe, and he's pointing out that that is not the way the Earth looks, but that the Earth is actually flat, and he has an image of the flat Earth. So. There's a whole group of people, thousands around the world, more than that, tens of thousands, 80,000, something like that, who actually believe that the Earth is flat. And I wonder why they do that, but that's what they do. So there's going to be some more videos later on. And if there's no sound, I'll translate. But bear in mind that, it's a Mercury-Neptune square today. So why would you want sound? But anyway, here we go. Whoops, yeah. Okay, yeah. That's actually my horoscope. And I have this kind of slightly messed up relationship with Jupiter myself. So that's my Sun is in the 10th, and Jupiter is in Capricorn. Must be in fall there, right? In the 4th house. And my dad was in the Royal Air Force, So he used to come home just looking like that on the left, with a hat and uniform, and he was a bit strict, he was a bit strict, he was, no doubt about that. And he was in Capricorn, and some Pluto stuff. So it was a little difficult getting on with him, but I still like him today. He's gone, but he's, I appreciate he had trouble with me. So anyway, he kind of believed a little bit in discipline. And I was in Cambridgeshire at the time, and I got this scholarship actually to Perth School, Cambridge, right? And Perth School is a public school in Cambridge, which I unfortunately managed to get into because of my high 11+ results, and I happened to be the most punished boy I went to boarding school, so that the Perth School has a boarding school attached, and I went to the Royal Air Force. They're always traveling, so I was in the boarding school, and it was bad, and I was the most punished boy in that boarding school, actually, physically, and they, the slipper, mostly slipper. If you're really bad, the cane, and the cane really hurt, and it was brutal, And I remember the housemaster. Think Jupiter in Capricorn here. The housemaster, he beat me with the cane once, and he says, "Duncan, this is going to hurt me more than it's going to hurt you." And then he proceeded to cane me, and it really hurt. He tried to do it again. I refused, and no, he never got to do it again. So yeah, that was Sun Jupiter. So since then, I've developed some belief. A belief system, and my belief system is that the system is out to get me. I think there's a system. It's the Royal Air Force, it's the boarding school, it's the government, or something like that. And this system, these laws that the system makes, the tax authorities, or society. This is kind of this Jupiter in the 4th house, my home country's system. They're against me, so the Sun, you see. So this is my filter, my belief system, where I kind of, I'm really alert to people who tell me what's right or wrong, or what I should believe, or what. And I continue with this kind of fantasy today, So there's astrology is not exactly the most accepted belief system on earth, and so I've always got these kind of dialogues in my head, where I'm sort of defending the principles of astrology against the system. So that's what that shows how how when you're filtering reality, or at least I'm filtering reality here through the Sun-Jupiter opposition, which actually limits my perception or a true perception of what the world like that is out there, because there's no system really. There's just people. They're all operating and trying to doing their job, basically. But you can always find a system to kind of get upset about, like Sun Jupiter aspects are very righteous, self-righteous. They hate something that's unjust, So I'm always inventing stuff that seems unjust. Yeah. Okay. So I thought I'd just illustrate a few people who are, a little bit affected by in a bad way, by their Jupiter. And as you can see, Hitler here, you can see that he's a really peaceful fellow. I mean, all these deer, they love him, and they take food from his hand, even. So what a nice guy. And Hitler said, if you tell a big enough lie and tell it frequently enough, it will be believed. That's his words. It's very Trumpian, actually, isn't it? And so he did tell a huge lie, really, about Jews, for example. And you can sort of see this in his horoscope. So Jupiter in his horoscope is pretty close to the moon. It's actually also really opposite Chiron. Maybe, I don't know what that means exactly. But the moon Jupiter in Capricorn is sort of, what do you call it, intercepted in the third house. So he had this feeling, that Germany was all squashed by the neighboring countries. And so he wanted Lebensraum. He wanted to be able to expand. He wanted to expand Germany beyond the boundaries which he felt were wrongly placed. So he needed to unite with the other German speakers in the neighboring countries like Poland, Czechoslovakia, etc. So the moon and Jupiter in his horoscope is actually, you need to look at the fifth harmonic to really understand what's going on, because in the fifth harmonic, moon, Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto, and Neptune are all in conjunction. So you could sort of say, and another way of saying it is that the sun and moon are at the midpoint of the Saturn-Pluto midpoint, or that they biquintile Neptune, Pluto, and Saturn. So it's a really kind of complex energy system channeled into the moon, Jupiter, in the third house, which was his speaking talent. Yeah, so no big deal, but that was Hitler entertaining his troops, and actually Hitler used to train in front of a mirror, and he got acting training, and he cultivated this style of speaking. His voice was actually quite soft. He got Venus and Taurus, but he found that he could magnetize the masses. And I think that's to do with the moon Jupiter in its third house. Right. So let's have a look at another belief system. And the national horoscope for Saudi Arabia is really interesting because it shows this an exact Jupiter-Neptune conjunction, and the Saudi government today, it's like it's a Wahhabi. It follows a Wahhabi faith, faith, which is a really purism, a really pure, this pure interpretation of Islam. So all the other Islamic groups, they're kind of considered like corrupt. And the Saudi royal family has a kind of deal with the religious extremists of fundamentalists of Saudi Arabia. So they're very dependent on the support of the fundamentalist Islam in Saudi Arabia. And this is a really terrible horoscope. Well, if you can say a horoscope is terrible, but you can see that it's got a Scorpio rising, Mars and Pluto together in the ninth, sort of jointly opposition Saturn. So Mars, Pluto, Saturn from the 3rd to the 9th is a really kind of extreme ideology. And then it kind of keys into Jupiter by semi-square. So Jupiter is semi-square, Jupiter and Neptune semi-square Pluto. So that's the cycle of the Pluto-Neptune semi-square activated by Neptune, by Jupiter. And Uranus is also in that. So it's a really extremist society. So we go on a lot about Afghanistan or Iran or Iraq or Syria, but Saudi Arabia is quite clearly, an extreme political entity, you can see in the quote on the left, they think this is great, that women who got, equal rights to what there was in the Old Testament. Yeah, that's wonderful, isn't it? And in the schools, in the school system, they actually, it's extremists that are teaching people. So all these Osama bin Laden, they're actually kind of schooled in extremist Wahhabism, you could say. I've just got a kind of little video here.
No wonder thousands of Saudis joined ISIS and other terror group, because they were trained in Saudi schools.
From the foundation of Saudi Arabia, the support of the religious establishment has been central to the royal family's grip on power. The regime uses traditional Islamic punishments. Executions are often carried out publicly with one sword blow to the neck. The headless bodies are sometimes then displayed publicly.
Yeah, that's where we get our oil. And it's a shame. So let's move on from that rather heavy clip. And here's another guy who's got a really strong belief system. Richard Dawkins, professor at Oxford University. And I don't have his birth time. But one of the things that's interesting about Richard Dawkins is that he travels around debunking spirituality, like clairvoyants, astrologers, anybody who believes anything. His kind of his belief is that religion. He's looked at religion historically, and he says that it's untested belief, so it's not scientific, which becomes an unshakable truth through the power of institutions and the passage of time. And who can argue with that? That's really clear. But you could also say the same about science in some way. I mean, it's not untested beliefs, but it's not complete knowledge. So what he's done, you can see in this horoscope, he's got Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in Taurus. So that's this established, religion. He sees established religion, and it becomes an issue for him. And then, as soon after he's born, Jupiter and Saturn kind of slowly come to conjoin Uranus. So the whole dynamic in this horoscope is for him to overthrow traditional belief systems and replace it with a scientific system. So that's what he does. But you could say the problem philosophically with that is that he's just replaced one system with another. And it's like not necessarily absolute truth either. And the paradox, and what I love about this horoscope, the paradox is that he's got a Moon-Venus conjunction in Pisces, well, Moon and Venus in Pisces, Mercury in Pisces, and Neptune, well, yeah, Neptune opposite Venus, right? Neptune opposite Venus and the Moon is like really sensitive. You'd expect that to be kind of, somebody who's very, very open to spirituality. But it's almost like it's kind of, what do you call it? Split off from his consciousness and projected out. I don't know what his ascendant really is, but then it's projected out. So he feels a need, I guess, or he felt a need to interview all these people and debunk the spirituality because of his strong belief system. And there's a clip here with Neil Spencer. Neil Spencer was the astrologer who wrote the sun sign column for The Observer. And this really pissed Richard Dawkins off because he read The Observer on Sunday. And, so he didn't want astrology coming in to the kind of highbrow intellectual kind of environment. So there was an interview with Richard, with Neil Spencer here. And I think Neil does quite well. He's quite good at kind of fending him off. And you can see, in fact, actually, that Richard Dawkins is a little disingenuous in the way he's asking the questions. He's kind of trying to lead Spencer into a kind of intellectual.
The cosmos as a place in which responds to us. It's not this cold, empty place that's been bequeathed to us by science. It's a more interactive place, and I think you can see
interaction happens. Interaction between people and the cosmos.
Yeah, I think so.
So some radiation from people, some energy from people that flows out of the cosmos or something. Is that what?
Yeah, so he's trying to get Neil Spencer to say, there's some kind of physical effect from the cosmos on people. Radiation, he suggests. Which is disingenuous, because, and he went on to suggest in this interview, which you can see on YouTube, by the way, he went on to suggest that they should make a kind of a statistical study of the sun signs. It was a very naive idea, and Neil Spencer refused to get involved, said it was Richard Dawkins was just making mischief, which I think is quite correct.
The cosmos.
So here's another belief system, or somebody who managed to capture the terrors of us all. This person has got Jupiter in Gemini, so she invented a kind of Hogwarts kind of school, which was the school of magic, and this sort of magical influence in the horoscope is like reflected by, the ascendant ruler Saturn-Uranus opposition, and the Uranus-Pluto conjunction. And the Uranus-Pluto conjunction in the mid-60s was, it's like a very, very frightening combination. It's like robotic and terror. It is to do with terrorism and, extremes, and Jupiter, the moon keys into this Uranus-Pluto, squares Jupiter. So, she's a writer who writes about magic and terror in schools. And you can see how well she does this here, I think. Yes, so there's a whole generation of young people from the 90s and zeros who are terrified out of their wits through this kind of ability that J.K. Rowling had to channel horror in her writings. Of course, it's a dangerous horoscope she's got. As she said, she said, rock bottom was the solid foundation on which I built my life. It's not an easy life. It's not an easy horoscope. Having the ascendant ruler, if you take the traditional ruler Saturn in Pisces, opposite Uranus, Pluto, that is not easy. And obviously, she subsequently, recently, has got into some trouble with young people because, she thinks that women are defined by their biology and not by their gender choice, which in the LGBT kind of period is not sitting well with young people. But she's willing to take a kind of what shouldn't be a provocative, but is today a very provocative kind of attitude towards that. So this is the David Koresh, who was in the, what was it called? The Davidian Church in Waco. And this was kind of stormed by the FBI, and I don't know how many people, 50, 100 people were lost because he set fire to the whole building and everybody burned in the building and they all died. So here's his logic. If the Bible is true, he says, then I am Christ. That's really difficult to argue with, isn't it? It's like he's got sun in Leo, and the sun in Leo is square Jupiter. So it's a very exact square. So that's kind of an example of, there's nothing wrong with the Sun-Jupiter square, but in this case, it really doesn't work out. And, perhaps because the sun's at the midpoint of Pluto and Uranus, perhaps because Saturn's on the IC, and some other reasons, I think, which if you follow the movement of Venus, which is his ascendant ruler, it's going retrograde, you can find what it does, some pretty bad things. So this guy, he gathered, I don't know, 100 to 200 followers in Waco, in somewhere, Texas or something, and they were kind of believed in the end of the world was going to come. They didn't want anything to do with the government. There was things going on there. Children were there, and basically nobody. He had these couples. The mothers and fathers were there, but he was the only one allowed to have sex with them. So not only did he have sex with all the women there, but he had another place in California. Which is a bit like this Venus-Mars conjunction in the 12th house. He had this secret place where he had really young women from about 12 to, 20, about 8 or 10 in this residence in California where he also used to go. And you can sort of, the interesting thing about this horoscope, I think, if you follow progressions, is that Venus is retrograde, and it actually goes back to 29 degrees Leo, or 2950 Leo, something like that. And in the process, of course, Venus conjoins Pluto. So the progressed horoscope shows Venus repeatedly activating the Pluto-Saturn trine. Basically what he did was build a fortress. That's Saturn. It was a kind of survivalist philosophy that he had, in which he was, I don't know, he sort of believed that he was Christ, and he was just the big guy. And you can see him here. He's on a little video here. They've just shot 4 FBI guys who tried to come into the place. So,
and I'm sorry some of you guys got shot, but hey, God will have to sort that out, won't he?
Yeah, God's going to sort it out. The fact that he just shot 4 FBI guys, a pretty unappealing character, I think. Some would say here's another unappealing character. But what he says is that all my life I served one master, the film. I love movies, and he does. This guy's a genius who made a whole massive amount of fantastic films like Shakespeare in Love, and he was obviously a creative mastermind. And you can see this in he's got Mercury Jupiter conjunction in the 5th house. Jupiter is exactly opposite Neptune, so it's like perfect for the film world. And nobody can deny that he did. He organized and produced some fantastic movies. Then there comes the complication. He's got Venus in Pisces, all right? That's little, and Venus is semi-square Jupiter, sesqui-square Neptune. So Venus is really keyed in to the Jupiter-Neptune thing. So he was surrounded by actresses who he invited to his hotel room, and that might have been okay also because he could have just enjoyed their company, but because he's got Scorpio rising and Mars on the ascendant, and Mars is exactly square Pluto. He is a man who can't control his sexuality. He's obsessed, and that's what got him into jail in the end. His ascendant ruler come into the 12th, Mars square Pluto. His predatory sexual nature. But his belief about film was, he loved films, and I think that's true. Okay. Oh, this is Courtney Love warning.
Love has also spoken out. A video of the rock star in 2005 came out showing the star warning young women in Hollywood about the movie Titan.
She's saying that if Harvey Weinstein invites you to a hotel room at the Four Seasons, don't go, and I suppose he tried it with her and she didn't go, I guess. Okay.
Love.
Okay, this is a nice story. And if anybody's on Netflix or HBO, I'm not sure what, there's this film called The Best of Enemies, which is a documentary or a reconstruction of this guy, C.P. Ellis. And C.P. Ellis, he joined the Ku Klux Klan as a very young man, and he became the head, the leader of the Ku Klux Klan. And he was, you can sort of see on the horoscopes, a bit problematic because he's got Mars in Taurus on the ascendant. So, that's maybe a little sextile Pluto. It's a little, dodgy. And he's got a kind of Jupiter in Pisces, opposite Neptune. It's sort of very Neptunian, isn't it? Jupiter. So, he's very sensitive to belief systems. And he can believe, I suppose Jupiter in Pisces can believe anything, really. And Jupiter squares Saturn. It's a very poor society he comes from. Everybody's suffering. They're poor. The whites are poor. The blacks are poor. So he sort of sees the struggle and this polarization in society with this mutable sign square. And, and he's kind of lonely. So he really gets into the Ku Klux Klan. So a situation arises in North Carolina where they're trying to integrate blacks and whites in schools. And, the Ku Klux Klan is really up trying to prevent this. And some black guy, I think, comes down from North America, and they have this kind of thing, I'm not sure what it's called, a special word for it, kind of a convention, where the blacks and the whites discuss. And they have to, they're like in this environment where they're not allowed to sort of go away. So they're there for like a week in a room together, discussing, and he's discussing with this black woman, and, who he kind of hates, right? And, it's a great film because you can see this transition process taking place. Anyway, I'll show you the end of the film because it's kind of nice. I mean, the kind of key part of the film. I hope you can hear it.
Before I go on, I'd like to show y'all something. My clan membership card. I was given this card 12 years ago.
There's the clan.
It's been in my wallet ever since. In fact, I cried when they gave me this card. I grew up in a house where I was taught men don't cry. I cried anyway. Cried because it's the first time in my life I feel alone. It's a real brotherhood. It is. In the clan, you look out for one another. Nobody's left behind. Everybody does for everybody else. But I'm the president of the clan. I'm supposed to hate black folk. I teach people to hate black folk. It's supposed to be inferior to us. Now, if I don't believe that, then I have no business being president of the clan. I don't believe it.
Yeah, so this process of discussion changed his opinion about black people, and afterwards he tore up his clan membership card, and he and the black woman toured the South, visiting schools and teaching about integration. So that's a kind of wonderful story where the guy redeemed himself really, and found a more truthful path. I mean, maybe you see that also in the Sun, Mercury, and Aquarius, that partly this is like intense involvement in the clan, but maybe it's just like too intelligent to kind of to go along with it for his whole life. So I'm going to leave you with this a much more harmonious Jupiter, or at least it seems Jupiter's in Scorpio retrograde, so maybe that's connected with kind of reincarnation stuff. But there's a Moon Neptune conjunction. The Moon Neptune conjunction is in the third house. It's opposite Saturn in Pisces, so that's a real suffering aspect. Neptune Saturn opposition is a complete awareness of the suffering of humanity with the moon. And the sun is beautifully trying Jupiter, and sextile Neptune. So it's somebody who totally understands the human condition and is just like motivated by love and compassion. And so he says, my religion is simple, my religion is kindness. And one of the things that is important for the Dalai Lama, I guess, he kind of wants to bridge. I think you see that with a lot of wise people. They want to bridge belief systems. They want to, they want people to understand the relativity of beliefs that different cultures kind of lead one in a particular direction. To make a belief system. So he's supporting all belief systems. And you can sort of see that here where he sort of says, it's very difficult to hear his
different philosophical view.
His words.
In philosophical field, basically two categories: theistic religion, non-theistic religion. Big differences.
So I've written it on the right.
But all teachings, all sort of faith, emphasis importance of love, compassion.
And that's the kind of lesson of Jupiter, I think, that belief systems are relative, that nobody has a monopoly on truth. There's what we believe, is almost entirely dictated by the experiences we've had in life, and the beliefs we have in the end are not a true representation of reality, if you can call the world out there reality. We get it wrong all the time, basically, but we gravitate to people like people who believe in astrology, if I can put it like that, who we gravitate towards, people who share our beliefs, and then that becomes like the kind of world we want to inhabit. And so if you take something like astrology, it's the good thing about astrology is that it's kind of ecological, it's organic, it kind of connects you with nature and the cosmos. You become part of something, you're not separated from it. And the problem maybe with materialistic science is that there's a dichotomy, there's this kind of much sharper division with what's true and what's false, and there's a more rigidity, I think. So astrology gives this kind of a real acceptance. If you understand the horoscope, you understand that people's actions and beliefs are completely reflected and individual, reflected by planets and individual to them. And as such, you can respect it, because anybody who had been in their situation would also start believing the same thing. So that's the great thing about astrology, I think, is like there's a kind of tolerance that it evokes. But we shouldn't get too attached to our belief system either. And you can see that amongst astrologers, where, horary practitioners, they don't agree with psychological astrologers, and they don't even agree maybe amongst themselves about, and they focus on the small differences that separate, separate them, whereas in fact they should be maybe focusing on the universal characteristics that unite them.